I'm Bruce Babbitt. I grew up nearby and I love this land. I served as governor of Arizona from 1978 to 1987, and I'm pleased to welcome you to Red Rock State Park. Back in 1980, on a splendid morning, I set out with our children to hike along Oak Creek. We eventually came to an open valley, in fact, where we are today. Then we saw the no trespassing signs. A caretaker showed up and warned us away. Hoping that he might relent, I mentioned that I was the governor of Arizona. He replied, "Yeah, I've heard that fairy tale 100 times. It's private property, and you can't hike here." Then, back at the state capitol, I learned that the property was on the market for development. It ought to be preserved, I thought. So I put my staff to work, and here we are today in Red Rock State Park. The sublime Red Rock vistas all around you are, of course, known the world over. However, the story of this region really begins with the riparian forests along the waters of Oak Creek. It is the streams like Oak Creek that have sculpted and shaped the landscape that you see. It's water that brings life to the land. And wetlands in the desert are a miracle of nature, sustaining resident wildlife and drawing in migratory birds with the changing seasons. My favorite hike here is the easy trail along the creek in the shade of the cottonwood, sycamores, and alders, where you can observe and learn about the beauty and diversity of our natural world. The park staff and volunteers are eager to help, to answer your questions and to show you around.
One of the most challenging things, I think, for visitors to get their minds around regarding geology of the Sedona area is the huge time scales that it took for these sedimentary layers to be laid down to form the formations that we have here in Sedona.
The beautiful setting of Red Rock State Park is the product of events that occurred in the Permian period of geological time. The planet did not look the same as it does today because plate tectonics had brought the continents together into a large continental mass called Pangaea, what is now Arizona, set near the equator. And as you can imagine, life was quite different 275 million years ago. It was a time just before the appearance of the dinosaurs, but some very impressive vertebrate animals have left their fossil remains. As Permian time proceeded, thick rock units were deposited in the Sedona area. Ancient mountains, precursors to our current Rocky Mountains, were being eroded, and the sands and silts were transported to what is now northern Arizona. In time, they formed a series of stacked horizontal bedrock layers that geologists call formations. The lowest and oldest unit was the Hermit Shale, made of silt and clay. It's easily eroded, and thus it creates flat areas upon which the city of Sedona could be built. Then sands were carried into the area to form the Schnebly Hill Formation. That was Sedona Schnebly's name that is being honored. The sandstone was colored shades of red because it included iron oxides. The hard sandstones were resistant to erosion, so they built the cliffs rather than flat benches. Our many hiking trails wind through the Schnebly Hill in the midst of a juniper pinyon pine forest. In time, extensive desert dunes covered the area. They were similar to what we see in the Sahara Desert, and they retain the distinctive cross-bedding of dunes. The whitish and pinkish Coconino sandstone sits on top of the reddish Schnebly Hill and can be recognized from many hiking spots. The last of the major Permian sedimentary rocks is the Kaibab limestone, deposited in a warm sea with sponges, corals, and other marine organisms. The Kaibab limestone occurs at the top of the Grand Canyon and is the huge flat surface of the Colorado Plateau. Millions of years after the Permian rocks were deposited, the region was pulled apart by major extension. When that happens, a central keystone drops down, creating a huge valley. Verde Valley is filled with silts and various sedimentary rocks, which make up the white and gray layers that you see in the Cottonwood-Clarkdale area and throughout the Verde Valley. Recently, that's a geologist speaking about 6 to 8 million years ago, huge sheets of molten rock spread out from the San Francisco Peak area around Flagstaff. These hot basaltic rocks could flow over large areas, and as they cooled, they created the dark columnar rocks that you see at the top of the local geological units. So enjoy the scenery. Keep in mind that interesting geological events were important in creating our spectacular red rock country.
Sedona and the Verde Valley were likely visited by Paleo-Indian cultures from approximately 11,000 to 9,000 BC, during which time there was evidence that big game animals roamed the area. However, the evidence for occupation by Clovis culture peoples is limited to just a handful of Clovis points. Sometime after 9,000 BC, evidence of big game hunting seems to have disappeared, possibly because there was a crash in the populations of big game. But scholars have different theories about why the big game may have disappeared from the area. The next time period with evidence of human occupation is called the Archaic period by archaeologists. This was from 3000 BC to about 300 AD. These peoples were thought to practice a migratory hunting and gathering lifestyle. Some of the archaeological finds from this area included clothing made from plant material, basketry, and grinding stones that weren't part of the archaeological record from earlier inhabitants. In about 650 AD, people from what is referred to as the Sinagua culture are thought to have moved into the area from the east, with most of the population living near the middle stretches of the Verde River. People living in the Verde River at that time bridged the geographical gap between the Hohokam culture of the south and the ancestral Pueblo culture to the north. You can see evidence of trading between these three groups in the archaeological record. After about 1125 AD, the Sinagua expanded away from the rivers and began constructing cliff dwellings in the red rock canyons of the area that came to be known as Sedona. The reason archaeologists refer to this culture as Sinagua is due to the evidence that they practiced dry farming techniques. This name is derived from the Spanish, which means without water. The Sinagua culture likely reached its maximum extent of territory between 1150 and 1300 AD. It appears that a majority of the peoples of the Sinagua culture abandoned the entire Verde Valley around 1400. Prior to European colonization, the Verde Valley was overlapping territory for the current-day Yavapai and Western Apache tribal groups. Many archaeologists believe that the Yavapai moved into the Verde Valley sometime around 1300, but others believe they may be the descendants of the earlier Sinagua culture. Apache tribal groups were historically semi-nomadic and traveled across vast areas, leaving few artifacts behind that would allow archaeologists to estimate when they arrived in the region. Historical sources suggest that beginning in the early 18th century, the Tonto band of Apache began moving into the eastern edge of the Yavapai's territory, and references specifically mentioned the Apache in the Verde Valley by the 1850s. Disputes between European homesteaders and indigenous peoples in the Verde Valley became increasingly contentious in the 1860s. By 1875, most of the Yavapai and Apache who were living in the Rio Verde Reservation were forcibly marched nearly 180 miles to the San Carlos Reservation over rough terrain and through difficult winter conditions. The modern Yavapai Apache Nation is an artificial amalgamation of two distinct cultures. This resulted from legislation passed by Congress in 1934, known as the Indian Reorganization Act, in an effort to establish a single tribe in the Upper Verde Valley. European American homesteaders began to occupy the area now called Sedona in the late 1800s. By 1900, about 15 homestead families, including the family of T.C. Schneble, lived in the area. The 286 acres that encompass Red Rock State Park were actually part of several different homesteads. Most notable were the Shermans, who lived on the north side of Oak Creek, and the Armijos, who lived on the south side. Pieces of that history can still be seen in the park today. The Willow House was built by the Shermans, but was expanded by subsequent owners. On the south side of the creek, park visitors can walk over portions of the Armijo Ditch, which is still used today to deliver water from Oak Creek to Cross Creek Ranch on the western border of the park. In the early 1940s, Jack and Helen Fry purchased about 800 acres of land that includes Red Rock State Park. Jack Fry was the president of TWA, one of the early commercial airlines in the United States. The house they built on the property became known as the House of Apache Fires and is situated on the top of the cliff above the creek. Helen Fry retained ownership of the property after she and Jack divorced in 1950. Over time, she sold off pieces of the original 800 acres, and the 286 acres that became Red Rock State Park changed ownership several times before it was acquired by the state of Arizona in the 1980s.
Red Rock State Park opened its doors to the public in the fall of 1991 with three main components to the park mission statement. First and foremost, our mission is to preserve and protect the riparian habitat associated with Oak Creek that flows through our park. Secondly, we provide environmental education programs to the public. Our hope is to inspire future stewards of our public lands. And lastly, our mission is to provide low-impact recreation like hiking and picnicking to the general public. The park boasts over 5 miles of interconnected loop trails, all of which are rated easy to moderate. We have trails that will take you right next to Oak Creek, down in the riparian habitat, and ridge trails that will take you through the Pinyon Juniper community. The ridge trails offer spectacular views of the West Sedona rock formations, which include Cathedral Rock, Seven Warriors, Napoleon's Tomb, the Three Sisters, and Button Mountain. What do I do if I see a snake? This is a question we get asked a lot here at the park. The quick answer is just to back away from it. Like most animals, snakes have no desire to have any kind of interaction with us humans. We are far too big to be considered food to them. Rodents and other small mammals are their primary source of food. But that doesn't mean a rattlesnake won't strike in self-defense when it is threatened. Which is why the advice I always give to the question, what do I do if I see a rattlesnake, is just to back away and give that snake plenty of space. Did you know that about 55% of all rattlesnake bites happen to males between the ages of 17 and 27? And about 85% of those snake bites happen on the fingers and the hands. Of the 7,000 to 8,000 snake bites each year, less than 10 of those are fatal. Our fear of snakes is a perfectly human reaction. It's self-preservation. So if you watch where you place your hands, don't pick the snakes up and give them plenty of space, then there's nothing to be afraid of. If we show them respect and respect their ability to defend themselves, we can quite happily coexist.
Oak Creek is one of the main draws for visitors to Red Rock State Park, and our mission at Red Rock State Park will always be to protect the portion of the creek that flows through the park in order to maintain the natural function of the riparian system and to provide environmental education opportunities to the public for years to come. Red Rock State Park's Connection program is our environmental education program that offers outdoor, hands-on field trips for kindergarten through 8th grade students. The goal of the program is to connect what students are learning in their traditional classroom settings with engaging outdoor learning activities. We offer programs on wildlife, geology, archaeology, insects, water, and botany. The programs are led by our rangers and park volunteers, and they include everything from examining macroinvertebrates in our creek to doing mock archaeology digs, learning how to identify animal tracks, taking guided nature hikes, and even earning a junior ranger badge. The program's busiest times of year are the spring and fall, and we can easily see 500 students in the fall and over 1,000 in the spring. The communities around our park are mostly rural, and they often lack funding for their school districts, so it's very important that we, as a state agency, can offer these types of extracurricular activities to local students, as well as all Arizona students. We want the students who visit our park to have a positive outdoor recreation experience where they can learn to safely and responsibly enjoy the outdoors and make real-life connections to the material they are learning in school. This allows them to make new discoveries and develop an understanding of the interconnectedness of our natural world. Our hope is that the experience these students have with our program helps to plant the seed of a lifelong stewardship ethic and an appreciation of the outdoors.
We also have lots of programs geared towards adults, like our daily nature walks, bi-weekly bird walks, monthly specialty hikes such as geology, archaeology, ethnobotany, and even moonlight hikes once a month during certain times of the year. We also have 2 star parties each year, sponsored by a local astronomy group. We also have an interpretive museum on the bottom level of our gift shop, and that has some great displays on natural and cultural resource topics related to the Sedona area. Red Rock State Park is also part of the Lower Oak Creek Important Bird Area, which extends from the park all the way downstreams to Page Springs Hatchery in Cornville. During spring and fall seasons, it's possible to have over 100 different species of birds using the habitat at the park as they stop over during their long migration from as far south as South America all the way up to northern US and Canada. That's why protecting the riparian habitat that we have in the park is so important, because it provides the stopover habitat where migrating birds can rest and refuel so that they can make it up to their breeding grounds in the spring and then back to their wintering grounds during the fall. There is so much to learn about the natural world. Our goal here at Red Rock State Park is to inspire visitors to think about human impacts on the natural world, both good and bad, and that they leave the park at the end of their visit wanting to learn more.
Parks and public lands are a wonderful part of our national heritage. Remember to support parks and public lands wherever you live, and enjoy your stay.